This is TWiT.
News outlets are reporting that Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella announced that the company plans to merge the currently separate version of Windows into a single unified version that will run on all devices of all screen sizes. But that's not really what's happening, according to Paul TWiT. Paul publishes the super site for Windows and co-hosts TWiT's Windows Weekly show, which airs, by the way, immediately after this show today. And he's joining us now to clarify what Nadella actually announced yesterday. Welcome, Paul TWiT.
Thank you. That's my new job, clarifying what Microsoft says.
That's right. It's like the White House press correspondent.
Yeah.
It's not an enviable job. Now
I feel like Baghdad Bob.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, you do it well. Nadella announced, quote, a single converged operating system for screens of all sizes, unquote. That sounds pretty clear. He didn't announce one version of Windows?
No. In fact, the funny thing is, if you really go back in time just a little bit, in fact, back to Ballmer's days, they've been talking about this kind of thing for a long time, have been converging Windows toward a single core. But, you know, that sentence immediately triggered a bunch of blog posts from folks and of course, questions from analysts and press about, what is this? This sounds like something new. You're going to get rid of Windows RT, Windows 8. You're going to get rid of Windows Phone, Windows Embedded, Windows for the Internet of Things, perhaps, and just have this one thing, Windows. And no. So, I mean, this is actually no different than what they've already been doing. It's not a strategy change. It's not even an enhancement of any kind. And when queried about this in the Q&A at the end of the call, the post-earnings conference call, he provided a little bit of nuance. I'll just read a little bit of what he said. He said, I was referencing he was referencing the work they've already been doing. Our SKU strategy will remain by segment. We will have multiple SKUs, meaning product versions, for enterprises. We will have multiple SKUs for OEMs, meaning for PC makers. We will have multiple SKUs for end users. In other words, nothing's changed. There'll be a Windows 8 Core or something like, or sorry, Windows 9 Core, a Windows 9 Pro, a Windows 9, Enterprise. I mean, it's business as usual.
So is this a PR or marketing mistake, or was it slightly on purpose to intentionally make us believe that there is some sort of streamlining going on?
Yeah, I think it's the point where marketing meets reality. Obviously, from a marketing standpoint, you want to, hey, come in as Nadella's a new CEO, and you're shaking things up, and he is shaking things up. He's also continuing a bunch of things that were already happening. And I think from the outside world's perspective, Windows is on the decline. We're moving to mobile devices and so forth. And this sounds like something strategic. We're going to rein it in. We're going to have one version of Windows that runs on everything. And it's not quite that simple, but it's really also not any different from what they were already doing. This modern platform where you can write universal apps that run on phone, that run on tablets, and that run on the PC, and then someday on Xbox as well.
Now, of course, there needs to be more than one version of Windows, and you've supported that idea, and you don't support the idea. If, in fact, this news was true, you wouldn't support that from what you wrote. But why not? I mean, Apple seems to get away with it, as far as I can tell, with a single version of their desktop. So shouldn't Microsoft at least do part of what Nadella appears to be claiming here? Shouldn't they just have one consumer version of Windows and one enterprise, for example?
Yes, they should, but that's just my opinion. I mean, to be honest, in many ways, what Microsoft does is a little bit like what Apple does on a broader scale. You know, they have the same core OS that they use across, in Microsoft's case, servers, PC desktops, tablets, phones, and even the entertainment console, the Xbox. Apple has, of course, the same core OS that they use across Mac. Previously they have server version, right? Server and client. And then also on iOS, which is tablet and phone. And so that approach is similar. Apple has always had a much similar product lineup. They have one version of Mac OS. In fact, now server is just something you add on to Mac OS, which is nice. On the Microsoft approach, we've always had different SKUs. It's the way it is. They've made it a little simpler over the years, and we used to justify it by saying, Microsoft's customer base is more diverse than Apple's. There were more of them, and honestly, neither of those statements is really true anymore. And there's less and less of an excuse for that. So, yeah, I think they should have one on client, one on server, or whatever. But, Microsoft would take baby steps here.
Now, of course, as you mentioned, there is something going on. They're sort of unifying the teams, which to a certain extent is PR. They're also providing a unified platform. So for developers, it's more it's easier to go from one version to the other, and so on. But for operating system like the version of Windows, I guess you could call it, for the Xbox, and the one that's going to work on their yet unnamed Internet of Things platform, these are completely different, right? I mean, these are not even, they're barely even Windows, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they are different, and currently, of course, they're very different. The Windows for the Internet of Things is out in a very basic pre-release version. It's not representative of what will happen, and so today that looks very strange to us today in the 21st century. It looks like something we would have seen in the 1990s, but I think that evolves. You know, the way that they approach development on these platforms today and in the future is much like this general statement, where it's a little bit of marketing, a little bit of reality. Yes, you can create something that they call a universal app that will run on phone, that will run on a tablet, that will run on a PC. But you're actually not creating a single app. You're creating a solution in Visual Studio that actually has 2 or 3 different apps. And when they add Xbox One to that mix in the future, if they add Windows for the Internet of Things to that in the future, you'll still have separate projects in there for each of the different apps, different platforms. And you will, in fact, be creating separate, discrete apps. They'll have some overlap with code, but it will never be, they'll never be that, well, I don't want to say never, but in this generation at least, there is not a single app that you can create that will in fact run on all 3 platforms today, or all 4 or 5 or whatever it is in the future. So even that's a little bit of marketing subterfuge, if you will.
Paul Thurrott writes for the Win Supersite. That's winsupersite.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Thurrott, and also on today's Windows Weekly show at 11 a.m. Pacific, right after this show. Thank you so much, Paul Thurrott, for coming on Tech News Today.
See you soon.